think the mistake a lot of people make is they think people who came before them, who succeeded in whatever that they were doing, or who were able to accomplish their goals, don't have the time to help them along. But what they don't realize is every single person that got to anywhere, regardless of where they is, wasn't alone getting there. At some point in their life, at some point in their journey, people have given them help and hand to get to where they want to get to. And everyone that makes it, I think, in whatever, or whether you're a successful businesswoman, a successful businessman, and a professional in your own rights in whatever that you do, they are willing to give back. I do believe in helping that other person to get to that point. So mentorship and finding someone who is successful in the field that you're looking into. I want to share that obviously with both new Canadians and youths. It's important to hang on to your identity and culture. Both of them, I truly believe, is what makes you who you are. And the moment you start imitating other people or following, who they are, you will lose yourself. Certainly. The other important part for me is that having a young family, especially children, it's important that I also teach them and show them, while adapting, being part of the Canadian culture, that they also have their own culture and identity, and that's also what makes it great, in this country, that we have people from different parts of the world, and that's how we are enriched in a lot of different ways. If I talk about all the challenges when you talk about immigration, especially being someone new that's coming to a new country, adjusting to new language, new culture, even from the simple thing as the weather itself, and of course pursuing education to ensure that you're able to not only come to this country, but you also can take advantage and appreciate the opportunities that are given to you. So for me, I would say certainly adapting to a new country, learning a new language, new culture, as well as getting not just kind of any kind of an education, but also the highest level of education, all the way to a master's degree, was certainly challenging. Of course, raising a young family in an environment that there are different expectations. Of course, teaching them of how you navigate and how you find yourself within a country that has multi ethnicity and cultures and races and colors, and finding your own space. It's certainly been challenging, but at the same time rewarding. If and the major point of it is that having a good start and believing in yourself, and at the same time knowing that you have either individuals or mentors or friends who will be able to assist you to overcome some of the challenges that you face. It's also the key part of adjusting. I didn't actually choose to immigrate to Canada. Back home, I left Somalia when I was 9 years old after the Civil War broke out. And before coming to Canada, I spent a few years in a refugee camp, and then that led to me immigrating to Canada through a family sponsorship, my aunt who sponsored me. So, but it wasn't by choice. It was the opportunity was given, and that's how I end up here. I think that's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to new immigrants coming to Canada. Often people have different views or different perspectives. But I think if I speak from my own experience, personally coming here, as I said, it wasn't by choice, but rather you're seeking a better life. Not only that, but you're looking to make a new home and see an opportunity that other people who weren't giving, who were in the same situations as you. And of course, the challenge is sometimes people who haven't been an immigrant or refugee might not understand the challenges that you face prior to coming to Canada itself, and it's always easier to pass a judgment on someone simply because maybe they have a thick accent, or maybe they don't seem to remember some of the or they don't seem to understand some of the things people that lived here for many years might see it as there could be those differences, but overall I think new immigrants, as a new immigrants, there's a lot of pride. There's also a lot of responsibilities where you want to make sure that not only do you make it here, but also that you try to help the people that you left behind. And I can remember, actually sometimes sitting inside the classroom, so many different students, of course, from different part of the world, but at the same time having that language barrier where sometimes you sit there, especially for the first few weeks or first few months of arriving, where you're not quite understand what the teacher's talking about, but you can't help it but to stick with it and to know that you are giving an opportunity to get a good quality education. I think what helped me the most was I've always liked, even growing up, even though in the camp I'm part of the there wasn't a school period in the camps itself, because you're on a survival mode, but I've always liked learning, and education always interests me in different ways. And I think even with those at the beginning, sitting inside those classrooms, for the first few weeks and months, and not quite understanding what the teacher was talking about, still allowed me to actually stay in an environment to and learn to the best of my ability. I was able to actually finish with my cohort. I was able to finish all my classes, just like many students who started in grade 9. And with all the challenges, there was a lot of great teachers and a lot of great community members who helped me adapt into the school family, as well as into the community, and that allowed me to finish on time with the cohorts that started in grade 9 that year. So in one way, I can say definitely sport helps youth not only, I wouldn't say stay out of trouble, but at the same time help them help them how to learn to work in a team environment, and also develop leadership skills from the coaches that are coaching them. And I find that sport was one of the elements, or one of the things that really helped me of course pick up the language itself, make new friends, and also learn how to participate in a team environment. So certainly sport plays, in my view, a major role when it comes to helping youth and helping children. And I remember this because, again, playing in sport, having coaches that really took the time to not only help players who were excelling in the sport, or who did not experience trouble, I wouldn't say troubled behaviors, but who did not behave accordingly. But they've taken the time to help all the youths. And for me, my coaches, especially coaches that I played for, were the ones that impacted me, and some of the things that I picked up from their teachings, from playing for them, it's that I apply that I continue to apply for my throughout my both professional career, and of course even raising my children and my family life. After finishing high school, my education that I was going to take a police foundations program, and my hope was to pursue of becoming a police officer. There was definitely different reactions. One, of course, the older generations who, and also the people who immigrated with me, lived in the refugee camp, and left their homes and seeking a better life. I appreciate their concerns because often when many people leave their home countries, they were prosecuted by the government officials, and often government officials would use the military and the police to oppress and prosecute those who don't agree with them for one way or another. And I think their impression or the idea what policing was like in Canada simply was what they've experienced or known from the places that they were coming from. So, and definitely a number of people actually try to talk me out of it, going that route. But I was committed, and I was simply committed because I really knew that they didn't quite understand how policing itself worked, in Canada and in this society, and how it was different from where they grew up, or how they've, the experience that they had with policing in the countries that they came from. Like I said, people did try to talk me out of it. Of course, you always hesitate, and you always think about saying, am I making the right choice of going this path? But I stuck with it, and ultimately, once the dream came true and I've joined, I think many people realize the benefits and also the difference one can make by joining that profession. Being one of the first Somali Canadian police officers in Ottawa, definitely I knew there was a lot of I wouldn't say pressure, but more of a responsibility, not only to represent the Somali community that lived in Ottawa, to also help bridge that gap between policing and also the community, to see if there's a way to have a balanced relationship, working together. And also the other challenge that came with that is, of course, coming from Somalia, being a new Canadian, policing itself was not also seen as a profession. And certainly when I decided to join, in law enforcement or policing, many, relatives were obviously apprehensive. Friends were as well. But I knew that this is how I wanted to contribute both to the community and my new home. And certainly there was an opportunity for me to always speak, because having an understanding on both sides what policing does, as well as how the Somali Canadian community functions, gave me an opportunity to continue to build relationships and bridge that gap between the two cultures. So, my giving back for me is one of the most important things I think one can do for the community that they live in, the people that are around them. And there's many ways you can give back as an individual. You can give back, financially. You can give back by donating your time. You can give back by mentoring. You can give back by, advocating and becoming a champion for something that you believe will not only help our society here in Canada, but also others that live around the world. And for me, I was always active, even as a new Canadian. I've always volunteered to whether it was camps, whether it was running basketball programs for youth who have lived in challenging communities, and the biggest one that I've undertook with my wife was helping build, a school for children back in Somalia, in a rural community, where I knew that, just because an opportunity was given to me here in this, in Canada, that I still had responsibilities to also help those who were left behind and who would not have the same opportunity that I had, or the opportunities my children had. And that's, giving back. And giving back itself also can be tiring, it can be challenging, but I do believe that, the more you give, the more you get as well. And also the more opportunities that are given to you as an individual, the expectation itself, it's also higher of you giving back and helping in whichever way capacity that you're able to help, without, of course, expecting anything in return. So for youth, I think for young people, there's always an opportunity to give, and all of us, regardless of where we are, there's always an opportunity, or there's always something we can give that others can benefit from in the communities we live in the environment we work in everything that we do. There's an opportunity to give back, and I do believe that's what makes our society stronger and allows all of us to reach our full potential. Your attitude actually makes a huge difference, and I remember when I tried out I played the junior team, but I tried out for the senior team the following year, but I got cut simply because once I got cut, I knew I was good enough, but I got cut. And part of the conversation I had with the coach was because of my attitude and how I carry myself, right? What that allowed me to do is the following year so I didn't make it that year. So the following year when I came back actually better than I was. And at that moment I learned your attitude plays a huge role in how you fit in society. And if you have an attitude and it could be whatever, an attitude that I'm better than everybody, an attitude that's disruptive, nobody's going to want to work with you, or nobody's going to be one with you. So from that experience of being cut from the team taught me that your attitude plays a major role in life in general. If you're not a pleasant person to be around, then nobody would want to work with you, or nobody would want to hire you. And what I've learned from that experience, coming back the following year, not only did I make the team, and then subsequent to that year, I've actually became the captain of that team, right? And that led them into, officer, led them into participating in. But here you have somebody who, but I could have taken that also experience two different ways. I could have, if I didn't check my attitude, and said, the heck with the coach, right? He's got a problem, not me. I could have diverted into a different path altogether. But I've learned from there that it was good that he cut me, because if he allowed me to keep going, perhaps maybe things would not turn out the way it did now. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So, your attitude and how you interact with people, I think, plays a major role of what you do, of what happens to you. And I think, many of the people I've played with or grew up with, they end up leaving school because they didn't like the teacher. They end up dropping classes in university because they didn't like how the professor talked to them. They end up, but that's, you can't. Sometimes you can't control what others do, but you can control what you do, and how you overcome those challenges. But for me, I think that's one experience I've always go back to in general, that your attitude plays a big role of what you're going to do in life. So if you want to bring the right attitude, attitude of winner, attitude of want to be success, attitude of yes, I can do, type of attitude, you will have a chance. If you come with the attitude that I'm better than you,